We are here for a 50 actions for 50 years of what was formerly known as the NAEA Women's Caucus, but which is now the Coalition for Feminisms in Art Education, or CFAE for short. My name is Kevin Jenkins. My pronouns are he and him, and I am an assistant professor of art education at Texas State University.
Hi, I'm Adetty Pérez de Miles, and I am a professor of art education at Texas State University, and I'm also vice co-president of the Women's Caucus, or CFA now, as um, Kevin mentioned, for the term of 2020-2022. So,
yes, we were the pandemic era co-presidents. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Julie Libersat. I'm Associate Professor of Art, Design, and Technology at Texas Women's University. I am the former exhibition coordinator for the CFAE, and I am the current conference coordinator, co-conference coordinator this year. And welcome. We're excited to start our program today.
yeah, absolutely. Welcome, everyone. So today, the actions of the 50 actions are basically the different things that we do, that we engage with, for example, in our teaching, in our art making, in our curation, our community work. And so we come together bi-monthly on the first Saturday of the month to share the work that we do with different communities, across communities. And so this is part of the work that we've been doing to celebrate the 50th year anniversary of the former Women's Caucus, CFA. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kevin so that he can give our panelists instructions on how to proceed.
All right. Very simple. So after our welcome there, we're going to start off. Each presenter will have, between 12 and 15 minutes to present. And we're going to go through 3 presentations, and then right in the middle have kind of a short Q&A session, give everyone a chance to get a few questions out. There is a Q&A option. I don't think I'm seeing it right now on my screen, but there should be a button at the bottom for a Q&A. If not, you can always put something in the chat. That's the nice thing about having a small, intimate group present, is that we don't necessarily, we don't have hundreds of people and trying to filter through all that. So it's, if you can't find the Q&A button, there is the chat button. And then we'll have the last 3 presentations, actually the very last one, because there is a special conference going on right now that is actually a pre-recorded presentation that we'll see. And then we'll have another chance for Q&A at the end. So as you can see, we'll be starting off with Laura Lee McCartney, and then moving into Sue Uhlig, and then on to Diana Garcia and Bridget Jones. And then after the Q&A, first Q&A session, we'll have Adetty Pérez de Miles and Julie Libersat, and then Sara Ishii-Bear, and then finally with Marie Bravo Moix. So, all right, Laura Lee, I will now hand it over to you. So again, I'm making all of the presenters co-hosts, and that way you can share your screen with us.
There we go. Okay, so this was a wonderful invitation, and I thank you so much for including me on the panel. I was especially drawn to the idea that this is the 50 for 50 actions, because what I'm wanting to talk to you about today is a space that I've resided in over my life as a curator and as a feminist curator, and looking back to the past and then anticipating what's in the future. And as I think about some of the exhibits that have really been spaces for me to begin to unpack what feminist curating means to me, I'm going to talk about two of the exhibits that I spoke about in our lobby activism book, and then point towards a current project that I'm working on with students at TWU. But I thought it was a nice way to kind of look to the past and then look forward. So as you all are probably aware, as we're talking about curating comes from the Latin word curare, which means to care for, to nurture, to guard, and to protect. And so feminists continue to ask what it means to be a feminist curator or to adopt feminist curator methods. And we're constantly wrestling with what do curators care about, and what distinguishes feminist curating. Just because a curator is a woman does not mean that the curatorial practice is feminist. So today I'm going to talk about two exhibits, Suiting the Modern Woman, that I curated in 1997, and Dress Stories in 2012. And these two exhibits really helped me to question my own learning about the curatorial process and to recognize and celebrate the validity of women-centered perspectives and stories. And then they also point towards how I'm changing and rethinking about the feminist curatorial, and really pointing towards and calling forth care practices to think about what would curating that promoted self-care and wellness and healing through creation and storytelling look like. And that's what is next. Oops, sorry, I went back one. There we go. I curated this first exhibit, Suiting the Modern Woman, when I was 26. I was already thinking of myself as a feminist, and I really wanted to talk about the role of women in the workplace. The exhibit actually showed the history of women dressing for work from 1900 to 1990. And it included several components, including historical pieces from the Texas Fashion Collection, and then also pieces that belong to high-profile Texas professional women, where they actually donated their power suits. And then there was a third component that was actually devoted to the relationship between Dallas designer Richard Brooks and then Governor Ann Richards, and how she would dress for her role in the state capitol. And so the storylines that I was giving throughout Suiting the Modern Woman were supposed to highlight women's fashion, but they really, through curation, were trying to talk about how women had broken the glass ceilings and how they were challenging patriarchal stereotypes and gaining access to success in their careers. Visitors received a lot of information on didactics and panels and vinyl letters and quotes about the history of women, but they were mainly in white-collar career positions in politics and education and philanthropy and journalism and the entertainment business. It told dress story narratives, but they were really specific to a certain class and a certain privilege, for sure. And then as we went through the exhibit, there were places for visitors to reflect on their own dress agendas and for them to leave their own story in visitor logs, and to actually talk about what dressing for success meant for them. And so when I really think about that show, curating Suiting the Modern Woman was how I did feminism in my 20s. And then moving towards the exhibit Dress Stories, that was how I understood doing feminism in my 40s. And I was wanting to continue to tell stories, women's stories, with feminist questions and concerns. But instead of focusing on other people's stories, I turned the lens inwards and was really thinking about my own dressing for success philosophies. But instead of it being about a public identity, it was more of a private identity, as I curated my failures as a mother and the way I was trying to dress for my daughter's success. And so becoming a mother of an extreme premature child who was born weighing 1 pound, 11 ounces, really shifted my understanding and my role as a curator. And the show, Dress Stories, was my first re-emerging back into curatorial work since I became a mother. And it really made me think about how I would collect and display and perform as a curator, but not in a museum as much as at home. The dress story exhibit was that allowed me the space to think about what are the similarities of invoking that notion of career, to care for and to nurture and to protect, and how do we care for objects as a curator in similar different spaces as how we care for a child as a mother. And so I found connections to Mary Kelly's work, especially her postpartum document, which she made in the early 1970s, that charted her son's development over the first 6 years of his life. And all of a sudden in this exhibit, I was charting my daughter's early years as a child with special needs. And I was telling the story back and forth through clothing of my own collecting. And it was important to note, too, that this story of collecting was one that I inherited from generations of mothers in my family, where clothing was saved and shared and passed down and given to the women of my family. And so other pieces in the exhibit belong to my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and items going back to the 1850s. So throughout the exhibit, I was actually layering these personal and sometimes painful stories of motherhood through big, large wall didactics and in gallery guides and even in vinyl lettering that would appear on the floor and in pinned to objects and tucked in drawers and spaces around the exhibit. And I tried to, invite the visitor to walk with me through these dress stories. The exhibit actually included over 150 pieces, including christening gowns and wedding dresses, my prom dress, the power suit that I actually wore to the Suiting the Modern Woman exhibit several years earlier. But then there was this tension because it also included pieces that I wore in the hospital with Elizabeth, or my plus size clothing as a result of being, changed and altered into motherhood, and also even my old pink bathrobe. And these artifacts kind of became a space of for analysis for me to really think about where my identity lied in the construct, because instead of the pieces belonging to who I thought were significant wearers or people who had a story to tell, all of a sudden with this becoming a kind of a personal autobiography, it allowed me to think about the ways that my clothing became a surrogate for my lived experience. And so even with this visualization of living between two worlds in a public and a private space, the curating all of a sudden started taking place at my kitchen table. And so late at night, when I would be working on my dissertation or struggling to clean my house or working to take care of my child, of something as seemingly unimportant as my bathrobe became a space that was really important to talk about and ask myself difficult questions about my relationship to my children and my identity as a curator. So in these spaces and throughout the museum or throughout the exhibit, I was thinking about how I was no longer performing curating in this public space, but in the private space, and how that mothering became a central part of my experience as a woman. But as I went through the exhibit and went through the process of actually installing myself and thinking about myself on exhibit, my thinking about feminist curating began to shift and change. And so I actually selected one of my great-grandmother's pieces that had been handed down to me. And I actually, this piece had not been cared for as a curator would care for it. And it had small tears and was discolored and had become damaged over several years. And I began to think about, instead of caring for things as a curator, what might the potential be if I began to uncare as an artist, researcher, and as a feminist curator. And so I actually sewed a big long red thread down the front of this apron and measured the scar that I had still on my stomach from when my daughter was born so early. And I marked that distance on the thread. and are on the front of the apron, and stitched this and thought about how I had been opened into curating differently. And what was important to note was that the day that this exhibition opened, the gallery flooded and several of the pieces were damaged and destroyed. And so in thinking about how, as the curator, I wasn't able to care for and protect the items that were on display, it started making me feel these reverberations again about how I wasn't able to care for and protect my daughter in the womb and in her early birth story. And so it made me start to think about the ways that we stitch memories together. But in having the pieces in the exhibit be damaged and to experience the flood, it also allowed me to accept the invitation to think about the things I might do with the pieces that had been handed down to me in provocative ways, and to think about what would the stories be in terms of this inherited collection and what I hand down to my daughter, and what we might do with it. And so in uncaring, I started thinking about how we might experience this vast amount of stuff that we hold and carry and drag through our life experience. So I created this piece called A Closet of Curiosities, and I actually piled and threw in years and years of collecting and keeping and things that I felt that I needed to tell me who I am, and who I am as my mother's daughter and as my daughter's mother. But I was not caring for these objects as a curator, but as a feminist curator, challenging visitors to think about how we keep and display and perform collections. And that, I think, really, this intervention of uncaring was my contribution to feminist curating in that show. And that was the space where I could think about how I could trace my ways of knowing from Suiting the Modern Woman to the dress story exhibit, and how I'm still in the process of becoming a feminist curator, and how I think about more opportunities for uncaring in my collections, and thinking about maybe ways that I might misuse objects to provoke more understandings as a curator. So that leads me to push towards what's next. And right now I've been looking at the work of Elsa Craney and Sophie Ling and Lena Fritsch, who have been writing about feminist curating, and also Kristen Lloyd, who suggests that traditional understandings of taking care of objects are to passing care to caring in relation to our institutions and the processing of caring. And they talk about how our minds, our bodies, our environments, technology, spaces, institutions, and social relations and communities are not external to caring, that we're all in the process of care and in need of care and receiving care. And so where the story picks up between doing the dress story exhibit and doing my current work at TWU, I just recently joined the faculty, and shortly after I joined TWU last fall, my father passed away in an accident, and then my daughter, a couple of weeks later, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I was called back into caregiving. And I am looking for spaces for those stories to be curated with new artifacts of that story. But I've also created a collaboration with another colleague at another university, where we're using stories of trauma and of the pain and experience of lived narratives with our pre-service students. And we're actually also using art care theory to allow spaces for students in pre-service programs to begin using art making as a form of self-care. And we've been collecting the artworks and images and stories, and we're actually putting those together right now in an exhibition, where all of a sudden sharing trauma across different states became a space for the pedagogical, for us to think about radical acts of self-care, and how we can refine our way as educators. So there's this potential in our curating for shared meaning making, where we're not just looking for the care of the objects, but also turning it inward for what it might mean in terms of healing and dealing with helping to care for self. And that communitas and the carryings of us carrying those stories back and forth will be an exhibition that is to come. So I'm at my time. I want to stop and make sure that everybody gets enough time, but I'm looking forward to that exhibition, and that will be happening next year.
All right. Well, looking forward to hearing more about that and hopefully coming up to see it. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Lily. Yes. All right. So next, we have Sue. Sue Uhlig. And I believe I had made you a co-host to share. So let me
Yeah.
know if you've
Okay,
not.
I just needed the other screen, I think, to be off first. Uh,
I think I ended it.
yep,
Okay.
yep, that's good. There's always that delay, you know?
Sure.
Oh, what is this? What is happening? Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, we see. Yes.
Excellent, okay. All right, so my president, I'm Sue Uhlig. I'm a PhD candidate at Penn State, and I have been for quite some time. Hopefully that will change soon. I'm also a lecturer at Purdue University, and I've actually taught at Purdue for about 18 years. I'm teaching online now, so that's where I'm from. My title is called Wonderful Collections, Participatory Projects in Research Creation and Research Curation, or Putting the Wonder in Wunderkammer and Curiosity in Cabinet. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about wonder and Wunderkammer and research creation and curation, and define these things up front, and then show how it's applicable to some of my work. My work is I work in collection. My own artistic practice and research really is in collections. I mean, I should mention to you I'm in art education because I know not everybody is necessarily in art education. So it's collections are also part of my teaching, but I'm not necessarily focusing on this here. So what is wonder? Because I have realized that I've collect things because they are curiosities to me. I want to know more about them. They become something that's special. But in terms of what wonder is, being open to possibilities is something that my own, again, research and artistic practice is kind of full of. I like a variety of different possibilities because it channels that need to have multiple ways of knowing. So it's not just one pathway, but it's multiple pathways. Wonder is also, besides the common, appreciation and admiration and delight, it also is doubt and uncertainty. And you delve into that because I think that's where possibilities lie, is in that area of uncertainty. From a small child, I was really interested in collections, and I was always enamored with the idea of the Wunderkammer. Wunderkammer is a wonder room. There traditionally, like in the 16th, 17th centuries, there were collections of natural objects and artifacts that showed the worldly collections of people in power, people with money. And they wanted to kind of show off to their friends these things that they collected, to kind of build knowledge and spark intellectual curiosity, but it was full of kind of colonist thinking at the same time. What is curation? Well, as Laura mentioned, there's a lot of overlap, and I can imagine there's going to be a lot of overlap with all the speakers. Laura said that curation is to care for, but then also to kind of trouble the idea of uncaring for, and then also caring for collections, but caring for each other, caring for self. And that's something that I've been exploring in my own research as well. We also think of curation as an act of being curious, making connections, building bridges. It's a public act, embracing a positive uncertainty, creative and critical thinking, and a way to engage audiences. This quote from curator Hans Ulrich Obrist is something that kind of guides what I think about collections. To make a collection is to find, acquire, organize, and store items, whether in a room, a house, a library, museum, or a warehouse. It's also a way of thinking about the world. The connections and principles that produce a collection contain assumptions, juxtapositions, findings, experimental possibilities, and associations. Collection making, you can say, is a method for producing knowledge. And that's something that I'm exploring in my own research. What is research creation? Research creation is basically an arts-based methodology. It comes from, it actually started in Canada as a way to help funding categories, but artists, art educators, curators, researchers took that and embraced it in a different way. So it's more of an experimental, indeterminate, complex intersection of art practice, theory, and research that embraces inter and polydisciplinarity as a way of thinking through art practice, theory, and history simultaneously. It fosters transdisciplinary investigations and gives permission for researchers to draw from their interdisciplinary background. Research creation generates new experiences, forms new ways of knowing, and requires new ways of valuation. So thinking about the Wunderkammer, it's this thing that perhaps is separate from self, and or maybe it's tied too much to self and it becomes more of this enclosed world. I was interested in artist Wunderkammer, and over about 15 years ago or so, I was in Amsterdam and saw Rembrandt's his Kunst and Wunderkammer, which helped to inform his artwork. And I started thinking about these collections, the Wunderkammer as an art practice, an art creation. And I started looking at contemporary Wunderkammer. The work of Joseph Cornell, Betty Saar, and Mark Dion all have these kind of curiosity cabinets that are rather small. Sometimes Mark Dion's are really quite large. So I started creating my own like miniature cabinets. And this is one of my first ones. It's a series of 5 boxes, sensory boxes of pedagogical spaces. And each box goes through a similar type of format. And the last box that I made is the touch. So this one is the touch box. And the boxes are about this big, the size of kind of a small book. And as you open up the lid, there is then a series of 32 cards. On the front, there is a photograph, and on the back, there are field notes or research notes about those particular spaces. And then lift up the cards, and then there's a map drawn on an acetate sheet of the place that I was, or the route that I did. And then the bottom layer are usually some kind of like more tangible artifacts, sometimes things that I made. And in this case, these were because the box was untouched. I was interested in tactile things. So I have clay that I pressed into schools. And I also, not schools, the outside of the schools, like if there's brick or whatnot. And then tooling foil to also kind of capture some of that, the texture. But then I realized I really am just focusing on my own experiences. And we interact with people, daily. What are interactions with other people, with other things? So I wanted to start highlighting different voices. And it was with this last box that I did. I started asking people that I interacted with for their contributions. So what is their experience of this particular school? I had my experience, but a student teacher that I was working with, what is her experience? So I asked Morgan, who is student teaching at Concord School in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, for her understanding of what Concord feels like. And then she wrote this middle section here. And then at Penn State, I asked another graduate student what her experience was of one of the buildings that we had classes in together. And that she wrote the upstairs in the chambers of secrets. So I started thinking, how can I liberate the Wunderkammer? right? I don't want to make it really about me. I want to make it about the experience of being in place, with being with other people, with being with other beings. In this book, it's Things That Liberate, an Australian feminist wunderkammer by Bartlett and Henderson, discusses this idea that objects don't have this fixed or stable meaning to them, that it's fluid. And that's one of the things in my own small wunderkammer that I make. The objects are never fixed. They need to be able to be touched, held, interacted with in some way, to engage in some way, swapped out. They can be taken by people if they wish. So it's never really quite the same thing twice. And when I've exhibited them in exhibitions, I think the curators usually get a little bit confused. The fact that I'm like, you can set it up any way you want. This is one way, but another way to liberate the wunderkammer is to have participation from others. And this is from Pablo Helguera's work, Education for Socially Engaged Art. And there's different ways to engage the visitor. You can have nominal participation up through collaborative participation. And I've designed a few exhibitions myself where I want visitors to engage, but I know not everybody is fully on board of being a collaborator or even creative participation. And instead, they want to be more, a little bit more passive engagement. And then last, to liberate the wunderkammer, I found from Masum Momaya the 10 principles for an anti-racist, anti-orientalist, activist approach to collections. Now, this list is really from more for museums and galleries, but I apply a lot of this to my own collecting practices to make sure that what I'm doing is not colonizing these objects or things, and instead to really have a stronger and deeper engagement. So one of my fairly recent boxes is recollecting or recollecting Palestine. My cousin lives in the West Bank, and I visited her in 2017, and her kids made my husband and me a sign. It says, "Welcome, Sue and Ed," and you can see this in the back. And as I was in Ramallah and Bethlehem and Jerusalem walking around, I picked up things that were, on the ground, like a Barbie's arm or a rusty nail or bottle cap. I found rocks, and her kids actually painted some of these rocks as well. So when I got home, I took these objects and then put them into niches, much like I found in my cousin's own house. This is her in her kitchen, and then also in the Mahmoud Darwish's museum, where you have these kind of niches that have objects set in them. And I also it was important to have these objects kind of tell a story too. So each object is tied to a place or an event. And so this small rock was found in the Jordan Valley at the library where my cousin had a library opening. It was a community event. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'll have to go quickly. This is Connecting Place. So I worked with one of my former students, Natalie McMath. She sent me some objects. She lives in the Cincinnati area. And I mapped out exactly where these objects came from. And then I engaged with them. And then I tried to set my own map, my own pathway, where we have this kind of shared experience. And that's the wunderkammer that I made from that. So the objects kind of talk to each other. And another small cabinet of curiosities, I had an artist residency in Petaluma, California, for a week. And I tried to get to know the place of Petaluma. It was where the residency was located was an old chicken farm. So I found chicken feathers, cleaned them. And then I did a series of cyanotypes of things that horses don't eat, because there's a few horses on the property, and I noticed they weren't eating certain things. They weren't grazing. So most of these objects I since later identified as toxic to horses. So it's good that they didn't eat them. But also important, I asked the other residents there for their contributions to what the experience of that particular place was. And we created a collaborative cyanotype, and then they contributed things for these vials as well. In my research work at Penn State for my dissertation, I had done a couple of exhibitions, Wunderkammer type of exhibitions, where I asked participants to either send me collections, bring their collections, or send me photographs of their collections, or make a collection in a workshop that I held on site. So that way, again, this is not just my collection. This is a community's collection. And it broke down, there was no barriers to this. Anybody can contribute if you're an artist, if you're not an artist, just that if you're interested in collections and would like to show your collection. So I have over 100 photographs from people who sent these images to me digitally. Like I said, I had workshops that students came, mostly students, some general public came and did some collection box making. And then this participant was really excited because she's not an artist whatsoever, but she was so excited to be part of an exhibition, and she showed off her clown collection. My most recent one is the Catwalk Collaborations of Place, in which I also, this is in Catskill, New York, where I was at a residency for 2 weeks. And I got to know the place of the residency itself was called Catwalk. And I got to know the grounds, the other residents, as well as the staff. And I asked them for contributions for what their experience of place was like. And so each drawer, each of the 5 drawers has objects that were contributed by some of the others that were on site at the same time. And I'll just go through these quickly. A few weeks ago, I was at the Ringling Museum for a conference on wonder, and my contribution was to create a digital Wunderkammer. So these are some of the results of what people contributed to a shared file for a digital Wunderkammer. And then last, I wanted just to show you this. This doesn't necessarily have anything to do with my research per se, but it has more to do with my curatorial practices. My dog Maya celebrated a year of being healthy after having severe different diseases like parvo and whatnot when we first got her. So in order to celebrate that, I asked some of my artist friends for portraits of Maya. And I ended up getting 51 portraits of Maya. And I also crowdsourced information like for people to describe what Maya's like. And I created a crowdsourced poem. And then this was exhibited at Juniata College Museum of Art. I worked with the director of the museum there, Catherine Blake, and her students, and they created this really amazing exhibition that was interactive, also socially engaged, and they brought in the local Humane Society for dog adoption events as well, because Maya, I should say my dog Maya is a rescue dog. So we wanted to really celebrate the idea of rescue dogs and good health. So I went through that pretty quickly. There's a lot of information there, but thank you. I really appreciate to all of the outreach to ask me to join this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. Lately I've been I'm still wrestling with the idea of whether or not I need a dog in my life again. So yeah, well, So thank you. And next up we have Diana Garcia and Bridget Jones. So Diana, you are free to take it away.
Okay, so real fast, I'm a school teacher. I work with second grade dual language. Thank you so much to Professor Adetty for inviting me for this. I also am involved with a tiny museum in San Marcos. It's called the African American History Museum, the Calaboose and Cephas House. It used to be a jail, and now it houses artifacts of African American culture in San Marcos. And so that's part of the reason I was invited for this. But in my classroom, I totally feel that children should see themselves in books. So we're talking about beautiful picture books with amazing art. Children should be given opportunities to discuss their identities. Children learn that they're a part of several communities: home community, school community, San Marcos as a community, more importantly, a global community. And children should have time to create art about themselves and their various communities. So this is a really quick example. So we're part of the school community. When school starts, we have the 16 de septiembre, when Mexico got its independence from Spain. So I'll put like teacher bought posters, but then my children make these posters: Hispanic Heritage Month, Viva Mexico. And then for Dia de los Muertos, this is something I started at my school. We put the Dia de los Muertos table, and my children make these little skulls that you see back here with the arrow. I had my student intern make this red paper skull. And then we invite people to bring their photos. If you can see, there's tiny little photos. And as we put it up for 2 weeks, so the community brings their photos and even adds to it. So they add flowers, they add candles, whatever artifacts they want. And the point is that our art serves our community because we're proud of our culture. We are global citizens. The whole world is our community. So we celebrate Women's Month. I put my children in groups. These are just a very few examples. We were celebrating Women's History Month. Somebody wanted to say, thank you, Harriet Tubman. Thank you, Madam Walker and Celia Cruz. Over here, we were celebrating Black History Month. I can't really, it's so tiny. I can't see. I know they put Harriet Tubman a lot. They loved Harriet Tubman and Mary McLeod Bethune. That's probably Martin Luther King Jr. that somebody put there. And again, for Women's History Month, they love Malala, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Malala. And they learn, what does it mean to be an activist? So if you see right here, one kid, I didn't tell her to put that, but she was using her vocabulary word, activist for women's education. And I'm very recursive: empathy, activism, problem solving. We talk about this pretty much on a daily basis. Children see themselves in books, but children create books and use their artistic talent. So we were learning about the Greek gods in English, but since this is a dual language, some of them opted to write in Spanish. So one says the adventures of Poseidon, Dionysus, Athena, and Artemis. The other one says the adventures of the Greek gods and goddesses, my stories. And we have Zeus and Poseidon. So just an example. And then what we do is we have a book gallery. Once they write, draw, illustrate, the children go around to the tables and they have to read at least 5 books, and they have to leave positive comments for each writer, like great story, nice action, like your details. But art is not just traditional. With technology changing so much, we have coding. Scratch Jr., there's a kid in the first one using an iPad to make a little snowman. She drew that. Hi, I'm a little snowman. And then they have to animate it. So it's very simple, basic coding for children. Over here to the right where you see the trees, a group was making their background for, we were going to do stop motion animation. We were learning about habitats. And so they were doing, you can't really see it, but there's tiny little lions and monkeys. And so they were going to animate their habitat. The one in the middle is one that I just went, thank you. I had asked the children, what is the most important thing you learned in my classroom for the end of the year? And a child opted to show me on Scratch Jr. She said, this is what I learned. The heart is worth more than the money. And using technology to do that. So basically, that's all I put in here because I wanted to do this quick. But, oh no, there's one more, my bad. Sorry, this one. What it is that children's our artistic and creative lives should be allowed everywhere. And so when they go outside, these kids were like, look, Miss Garcia, we made a little garden for the ladybug. And then when the roly-poly season came, the children were so excited. And during their free time, they were making roly-poly, they called them mansions. They were mansions for the roly-polies. So just allowing children to be creative, and the kids would come up to me and say, will you take a picture of this and send it to my mom on Class Dojo? So children knew they had the space to be creative, where it could be with their drawings, it could be with the Legos, it could be with the wooden blocks, it could be with Scratch Junior. The whole point is that we are problem solvers, we're artistic, we're creating, and we're affecting our communities. Okay, Bridget, you're up next. So I guess I need to do stop share. Okay.
Thank you, Diana. So Diana and I worked together my first year teaching. Should be here. So my first year teaching, I was lucky enough to be on the same team as she was, and it really helped me to realize that kids are able to have deep and hard conversations in the second grade level. We taught second grade together. And then I moved campuses, but I kept her spirit. And then I became an art teacher, and it made it even easier to have those conversations and build community connections using art. I actually will be leaving the art position this year. I will be a school counselor at a middle school, but I will continue to do like creative projects with my counseling kiddos. Anywho, so these are some of the things that I've done over the course of the last few years in the art position. I really try to tie the bulk of my lessons to things that are happening in the community to get families out in public away from the school together in a non-academic, non-threatening space. So I kind of look at what are the things that are going to be happening in our general area that I definitely want to hit on, and then kind of fill in the gaps with actual like art teaks in the middle there. So this is the hallway leading up to my classroom. We start with letting everybody know that all kiddos are artists. I have welcome written in several languages on my door to make sure that we are a multicultural space and inclusive of all people. And then I like to start local. So we started with some of our local murals in San Marcos, Texas, which is where Texas State is. So some of the ones on the left are some of the ones that we covered, and that bottom one is actually painted by two other art teachers in our district, which is pretty cool. And then they recreated them, and so the ones on the right are their product. So this is, I like pencil sketched it out, and then they got to fill it all in, and they are in the hallways at our school, super cute. We are also the mermaid capital of the world, and we have a mermaid march. You can take a virtual tour that's hyperlinked there. But there are, I believe, 10 mermaid statues that you can do like this big walk to. There's a mermaid parade every year, and I always sign our kiddos up to march in the parade. But since we're the Hernandez Heroes, we do the Heroes and Mermaids, and the kids can wear costumes and have a great time, or they can be undercover and not wear a costume. And then we also participate in the cleanup. So after the parade and there's like a big promenade downtown, we signed up this year to community service, clean up after the fact. The whole purpose of it is to keep San Marcos beautiful and keep our rivers and waters clean. So really tying it into, we can have fun, but also clean up after ourselves kind of deal. That also segues into the Sacred Springs powwow. So there is a huge powwow here in San Marcos. There's an origin story that the first people in the earthly realm came out of the San Marcos Springs. And so we talk about the aquifer, we get kind of sciencey. We talk about being water protectors. I partner with our librarian and our music teacher quite often. We look at the legend of Crow with the Rainbow Crow story, and they do like a music. John Legend did a short film, which is really incredible. So they do a music part there. I also do dance clubs, so we do a dance to that as well. We look at different Indigenous stories. I use a lot of literature. I'm very aware that as a white woman, I don't have a lot of these experiences that my students have. And so I really like to lean on literature and videos from people that are living those stories to be the teacher in those moments. I'm more of a facilitator. So stolen words is one that was really powerful for our kiddos. And then we have our Legend of an Indian Paintbrush and Bluebonnet because we're in Texas. Then we go into Hispanic Heritage Month. Kids love Frida. They love Dolly. They love the mustache. They love that surreal art. It's super fun. Mexican folk art. Again, we do a fall after school or evening event. So this was one of our fine arts nights that they got to make fun things. Sights and Sounds is one of our biggest community events. This year we made these candles for peace, and we had one hanging in our hallway and one hanging up at the event. With the world as it was, we really tried to focus on peace and love and cuteness here. We have a butterfly festival in Wimberley. That is a huge deal. So we participate in that. We have a STEAM fair. This is probably my most proud lesson that I've ever done. We had some kiddos on campus that were wheelchair bound, and I had a wheelchair donated that we painted the wheels and rolled them around to make a giant, or two, actually, we made two of them, but giant like color pages, and then took that to the STEAM fair and let the community paint each little section of that. And then it's hanging in the library at our school. And then the other one is in a conference room. So that's like my pride and joy. I wish I could have taken that with me when I left. Autism awareness, we have a large, because we have our alternative curriculum learning students on campus, several of them have autism. This little guy is, I'm gonna miss him probably the most. He is such a great little artist, and I follow drawings by Trent online. So we looked at his art, and the kiddos got to create their own hybrid animals in his style and then upload those to a Padlet. And then why we're here, actually, or why we were invited, was our collaboration with the Calaboose Museum and the Cephas House. So each year we try to participate in the Juneteenth celebration, but it's like, oh my gosh, that's in the summer and it's May and we're figuring out how are we going to get this. So I tried to front load and got with Diana to see if we could have our entire 5th grade class instead of just having like a handful of kiddos participate. It's really hard to pick who you want to have those small group lessons with. So we decided to do all of 5th grade was going to get a canvas, and they donated canvases to all 60 plus kiddos. We talked about several different movements and artists. Again, books are my best friend. So Maya Angelou's Life Doesn't Frighten Me, combined with Jean-Michel Basquiat's artwork. And they got to paint on newspaper and collage those together. Alma Thomas, Aaron Douglas, Clementine Hunter, lots of different collaborations and inspirations. I love that we have Kehinde Wiley right here in, is it New Braunfels? I did not know that. I was so excited when I found him. So we do a digital art where they get to collage different themselves or different celebrities within floral backgrounds, which is super fun. Freedom quilts, they collage these with scrapbook paper, and we listen to the Patchwork Path. We went from my first year doing this, I was only able to have 3 kiddos participate. And then, so we had a big lesson on what Juneteenth is. They got to go around and present to their classmates and explain, they taught them like what it was about, which was super fun. Then the next year, I think we only had like 6 to 12 kiddos participate. And then this year we had over 60. This is only some of them, but they were inspired by all of the things. And it was great. I'm so glad that we were able to do that with everyone. So we have family painting nights where we have the community come together, different things that we can have them just contribute to make sure that we're always putting peace at the forefront of everything that we do. So that's that. I hope that was fast enough, not too fast, all the things.
Well, thank you, Diana and Bridget. And yes, it's time to open things up for at least a brief Q&A if anyone has questions or maybe even comments. So you can just unmute yourself if you have any questions.
I just wanted to say thank you so much because I didn't know what to expect. And so I'm learning a lot and taking notes. And from Laura Lee, I learned what I love that word curation, and I love to curate my own stuff, but I didn't know it meant to care. And that makes a lot of sense, and how we present our identity. So I really love that. And I loved, like Bridget made in the comment, the little, I learned that word wonder, the wonder boxes or curiosity collection. So thank you for educating us also.
Well, I did have a little question there. I mean, I love the fact, Diana, that that you've been doing activism with the students and at second grade, right? And I know, like, I have students, in the art education program. We tell them like, well, these are the things that students, even young students, are dealing with in their lives, and they sort of freak out thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble for, doing some kind of activism with the students. And I just wondered, if you had maybe words of wisdom you could share where I could maybe help quell their fears of talking about these sorts of things or having students think about activism in their classrooms.
I always use the TEKS, which are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And so things like in social studies, different ethnic groups contribute. So that's my I have a TEK for everything. I'm not just going to historical figures. You have to teach historic figures. And there are so many beautiful children's books nowadays. You can get the Tomas Rivera award-winning books, the Coretta Scott King award-winning books, the Pura Belpre award-winning books, and they are about real things. I use picture books about things that really happened where ordinary people were being activists. So it's not like some dream we're concocting. It's like we're continuing that fight. We're not done. We're not at the finish line. So, and it's crucial. I mean, look at the world the way it is. It is crucial that we teach children critical thinking, creativity, imagination, hope, joy, and the fact that you can be a problem solver. And if you can't talk about the problems, how are you going to get around solving them? So please tell your college kids just to stay calm, have courage, but make sure you have your TEKS, because then you could always say, oh, am I not supposed to teach this? I was just following the TEKS here.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a quick comment. I think that, part of the conversation, one of the things that I have been so impressed with Diana's work is the way that she curates the materials that she selects, the literacy. And, curating, that is a big part of being an activist, right? The things that you curate, your syllabi, the books that you're going to cover, the concepts that you're going to cover in your classes are all a part of sort of that curation and how that frames your pedagogical perspectives is so significant, and just utterly impressed that, second graders are thinking about, well, what does it mean to be an activist? So just wanted to share that.
That's okay. If you don't have questions or comments right now, right, you may be something that pops up to you later on. That we do have the chat area you can post something into, even if it's, you could post it to everyone, or you could select a particular person within the meeting to privately share a comment or a question to. And we also do have another Q&A session at the very end. So maybe as things are formulating, it might come up at the end. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Adetty and Julie.
Okay, I'm going to wait for Julie to put the share our slides.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
And can you see my screen?
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, so part of the commitment to gender inclusivity of the Coalition for Feminisms in Art Education, or CFAE, has been the regional artist talk that we facilitate every year during the National Art Education Association convention. And our group has been involved with inviting artists in this initiative for decades. So basically, the exhibition coordinator, like Julie and now Laura Lee, work closely with the presidents of the organization as well as the membership to nominate and to invite and facilitate an artist talk during the convention. So the goal is to highlight the work of women and diverse groups during the convention. And this has been especially significant because gender and diversity in the lineup of the artists that are usually featured in the convention for a long time was not gender inclusive or diverse. This has changed significantly for the better. So with the new NAA leadership, so there's been a lot of improvement. But nonetheless, the regional artists talk was a way to connect with people in the cities that we're visiting during the convention. And so for us, it was very important to reach out to the regional artists. It was a way to create opportunities to build community. So one of the ways that Kevin, Julie, and I create this coalitional work across communities is through curation and exhibition. So Julie is actually going to discuss our first action of the 50-50 actions in San Antonio last year, which involved exhibition and curation. But before I turn it over to Julie, I wanted to mention that another way to build community is to promote the artists in your community, especially if the convention is going to take place in your city. For the San Antonio convention, I worked with the NAA leadership to nominate artists in the community. And as a result, we, Mark Menjivar and Jennifer Dachuk, do we have had keynote addresses at the convention. Their work is incredibly significant. And we're not going to talk about their work today, but I do encourage you to look up their work. But through this sort of bridging community with our organization was a way to highlight their work and for them to have a very wide audience of art educators to get to know their work, if they didn't know it already. And I think that before I turn it over to Julie, I also want to say that another way that art educators, and this is very important for art educators in higher ed, another way for us to build connections is to tap into the work that K-12 educators are doing in our local communities. For example, the work that Diana and Bridget just shared with us. It's a way to sort of build those bridges between higher ed and K-12 that sometimes are, not, especially during the convention, there's a little bit of a gap between what we're doing in higher ed and what's happening in K-12. And as you can see, the work is incredibly significant. I mean, they are working with our future activists. So, just thinking about what is it that we can do to build coalitional work across different communities is something that has been really significant for the work that we do individually and collaboratively. But I'm going to turn it over to Julie so that she can share the work that we have done with the regional artists.
Great, thank you. So today we are highlighting our Adetty, Kevin, and I's dedicated actions for the 50-50 project during the 2020 NAEA conference, which was held in San Antonio. And so as Texans and CFAE members, we embrace the opportunity to curate community for our CFAE membership and take advantage of our local access to create events and opportunities to connect with each other. So especially after the pandemic, when we'd all been meeting virtually and we're really craving in-person opportunities, this was incredibly powerful. So as the exhibition coordinator, my role was to solicit and collect nominations from CFAE members and organize voting for the regional artist speaker. This process itself, as Karen Kiefer Boyd called it, is a form of feminist art education as we learn about regional feminist artists and their work and then select a speaker. So in 2023, the membership nominated and voted for Houston-based artist Ju-Young Che. And you can see her here at the conference giving her talk. Ju-Young Che is a Korean-American multidisciplinary visual artist working with painting, sculpture, and video to portray the mythology of a fictional world she calls the cosmic womb. Che's work includes soft sculptures, puppets, paintings, animation, and video art. The cosmic womb is a paracosm with its own characters and mythology. She uses the motto, "Have faith, for you've always been loved." Her work explores aspects of her own identity and her experiences with adoption, offering ways for Che to step into roles of different characters and for her viewers to imagine a better and more loving world. We had the amazing opportunity to actually see her work. To see her work in person because she had a solo exhibition in San Antonio at the Blue Star Contemporary. And so after her presentation at the convention center, we members went as a group and toured the exhibition at the Blue Star. And you can see here some of our members posing in front of her extremely large, immersive, and colorful soft sculptural installation. And then, I think another important and sometimes overlooked aspect of fostering opportunities for community I want to highlight. So Adetty, Kevin, and I organized a multi-caucus party at the Blue Star Brewing Company, which was next door to the Blue Star Contemporary. And the multi-caucus party brought together members of CFAE, the Caucus for Social Theory in Art Education, and the Art Media Technology Special Interest Groups. And I think these kinds of informal opportunities to connect are really important for scholars that are, separated across the country and fosters real world and personal connections between art educators. Lastly, we want to highlight an additional curatorial project that Kevin and Adetty and I took on in honor of the conference in San Antonio. We connected with Sala Diaz, which is a local nonprofit gallery and artist residency located in a historic home in San Antonio. And in 2023, Sala Diaz made the commitment to exhibit women artists in acknowledgement and celebration of the centennial ratification of the 19th Amendment. So Sala Diaz generously invited us to curate an exhibition during April of 2023. And we invited Pakistani Iranian artist Nida Bangish to exhibit her work in a show titled Bowl or Speak. Part of the 50/50 feminist actions to celebrate the 50th anniversary. We chose to work with Nida Bangish in solidarity with the Women Life Freedom movement which was going on in 2023 in Iran. Speak explores the form and notion of home using patterns and motifs from Persian and South Asian miniature paintings. The title references a poem by Pakistani poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, written in 1979 against the dictatorial regime of General Zia al-Haq. The first line, "Speak for your lips are free," has become a universal anthem of protest after singer Iqbal Bano performed it in 1986. And so as you can see in this photo on the right, it was a really warm gathering and truly a celebration, an opportunity for celebration for the Coalition for Feminisms in Art Education.
All right. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Julie, for the picture there of Liz and I kind of goofing around. We made sure not to get too close to Gion's work, and she's pretty sensitive about that. All right. Well, so Sara, let's see if you had.
Yeah, let me pull up my presentation. There we are. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for inviting me to be here today. My name is Sara Ishii-Bear. I'm an assistant professor of art history and visual culture at Texas Women's University. As feminist scholars have argued, marginalized groups such as women and artists of color have historically been left out of the art history canon and subsequently art history pedagogy and research. So by minding the gap, I'm interested in the ways in which, as an educator and researcher, I can work to identify some of these blank spots, or what Gloria Anzaldúa might refer to as desconocimientos, and help with other efforts to fill these gaps. One primary means of inclusion is a careful attention to the artists and theorists that I curate in my teaching and research. So also minding the time, I'll just briefly discuss my implementation of open educational pedagogy in my teaching, and also my focus on under-discussed and marginalized artists in my research. So I'll start with the teaching. When open education is discussed, we might often hear it in the context of open educational resources, or OERs. So an OER is defined by UNESCO as, quote, teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no access or no cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions, end quote. So a critical factor of an OER is its open license, which appeals to universities because it helps reduce or eliminate textbook costs, theoretically providing students with greater access to learning if students are not prohibited by access to digital devices. Furthermore, OERs give professors the ability to customize the materials to suit their courses. When I first began working with open education, I was interested in using OERs for my World Art History 1 and 2 courses. So these two courses fulfill requirements for both our visual arts degrees as well as the Texas core. So I have large online courses that are composed of students from across all our disciplines at TWU. So I not only want to use OERs to reduce student textbook costs, but I also want to move away from the traditional commercial textbooks that are organized in a way that privilege Western art history chronology. So for example, the Cengage book. As I see this framework as being problematic because it sets up a narrative that Western art history is more important and lasting. So we see these really extensive timelines dedicated across multiple chapters to Western art history. And then in comparison, global art is shoved into a few chapters in the back. And so it sets up this idea that global art is less important or not as lasting. In my search to find an introductory art history textbook that was an OER, open access book, I found Boundless Art History, which was free, although it was still kind of heavily focused on Western art timeline. But because it was open access and I had the ability to reuse and remix the material, I was able to rework the information found in Boundless Art History to create 3 different types of teaching materials that I now use in teaching World Art History 1 and 2. So these materials include new chapters that are based on time frames. So for example, 2000 to 1000 BCE, I went through all of boundless art history, through all the different regions and areas, and pulled information about those cultures and the art at that time and put them into that chapter. So each chapter is global, not just focused on Western art history. I created PowerPoints to pair with those readings. And so the PowerPoints would summarize the key ideas from the chapter and then also have additional artworks. And then I had a chapter outline that listed the cultures and regions included in the reading, and then also had sample discussion questions that I personally use for discussion boards, but people could use it in a face-to-face class for in-class discussion. And so this work is published on the OER Texas website, so it's available to anyone who would want to use any or all of it or remix and adapt this work. And my central aim was to break down this hierarchy that places Western art history above global art. It's important to me to do this type of work because of the diverse student body that we have at Texas Women's University. I want students to find art that they connect to culturally and have that art be seen as just as important as Western art. Of course, this OER, the remix that I've done is not perfect because I was working with material that already privileged Western art. There's still a bit of an imbalance and I need to continue to work with and insert more material on global art in order to do a better job of breaking down this hierarchy. After kind of wading into the OER waters, I wanted to do more with open educational practices. Robin DeRosa and Scott Robinson put it nicely when they state that OERs are not just tools to lower student costs and access barriers, they're also an opportunity to involve students in content curation and creation. And furthermore, when grafted to critical lenses aimed at inclusion and social justice, open educational pedagogies or practices give opportunities to empower learners through co-producing their learning. Instructors can develop teaching styles and assignments that emphasize active engagement with their students. Bell Hooks emphasizes the need for instructors to value and invite student contributions, stating, quote, as a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, and recognizing one another's presence, end quote. In each of my classes, I take this to heart and I aim to value my students' ideas, opinions, and lived experiences by engaging them in discussions over the course content. But I wanted to take this a step further. In fall of 2022, I implemented what I called a student-generated OER project with my Art 3173 Contemporary Issues in Art students. This project involves students creating OER lesson plans, and this is just a template of that lesson plan here, where they chose a theme connected to contemporary art and created this lesson plan, and it was geared towards higher education. So working in groups, students chose and researched a theme. Then they developed a lesson plan that included a summary of the topic, key readings, a list of artists and artworks connected to the theme, discussion questions, and additional teaching resources, so such as YouTube videos or activities someone could do in the classroom. It was important for me to have the students self-select their topics. One, to increase buy-in and engagement, but two, because of my classroom demographics. So my class was comprised of approximately 50% students of color, and nearly all of my students identified as women. So in having them choose the topics, students of color and women students' perspectives and interests were brought to the foreground. Over the course of the semester, the groups produced their lesson plan, taught it to their peers at the end of the semester, and then I was able to compile all of their lesson plans and edit the material to create this OER that was also published on the Texas OER website. So just the themes that the students chose include art and disability, dark surrealism, eco art, expressing identity with the human body, kitsch and art, mental health and illness and art, and then the gaze, sexuality, and perceptions of the female body. So I feel like I really got to learn from my students through this experience too. Then moving on to research, in the past few years, I've focused on locating intersections between artists of color and feminist theories, particularly pertaining to East Asian American heritage and mixed race identity. These are areas of interest because they intersect with my own identity, and then they're also topics that I'm dealing with in my artistic practice. Therefore, I see the curation process in my research, so which artists to work with and which theories to kind of pair with their work becomes another opportunity for me to learn. For example, last summer, I began an ongoing art series that examines my great-grandmother's immigration journey from Japan to Hawaii. And I was particularly interested in the concept of visibility and invisibility, both in her experiences and then how it relates to East Asian American women more broadly. This desire led me to examine the art of contemporary East Asian American women whose work explores the intersections of gender, race, and citizenship. And so that led me to this research project I have highlighted here, and I explored the question, what aspects of invisibility are made evident by contemporary East Asian American women's art? And I looked at the work of Julia Kwan, Monica Tai, and Shizui Siegel. And while each of these artists draw on different materials and aesthetics, when I view them collectively, I see them as challenging the underrepresentation and marginalization of Asian American women, both in the visual art world and then in historic and contemporary American society. Following that project, I began a study that sought to highlight the work of bi and multiracial artists. Few studies and publications have been devoted to this topic. And so I wanted to kind of contribute to this understanding of mixed race art by exploring the research question, which concepts are expressed in bi and multiracial visual artists' work surrounding their complex racial ethnic experiences. I interviewed and examined artwork by 5 self-identified bi or multiracial artists from the North Texas region. And I have their work highlighted here, and one artist chose to remain anonymous, and that's why I don't have her work shown on this slide. In the interviews and artwork, I found 3 primary themes: familial influences, navigating outside impact, and exploring hybrid identity. And then in the second direction I took for this project, I examined the artist's work alongside Gloria Anzaldúa's theory of Autohistoria teoria, a form of autobiography that theorizes about the context of individual experiences as it relates to the larger community. And then in drawing on an Anzaldúan theoretical framework, I reflected on how the personal aspects of the artist's work complexifies understandings of racial and ethnic categories and can ultimately have the potential to transform or potential for transformation through the artist's making and the viewer's viewing of the artwork. And my point here in outlining these 2 research projects is to note how curation and research can be an opportunity for learning and dialogue. So for each project, I kept in communication with the artists. So I consulted them if I had questions or asked them to read drafts of the manuscript for fact checking and to ensure that I reflected their ideas in their work. And through this dialogue, I learned even more from the artist, even beyond just the interviews and artist statements and viewing their work. And it was really interesting for me to also hear from the artists and have them comment on how, when they read the work, they really resonated with or learned from the other artists or theorists. So to conclude and consider both teaching and research, I've come to find that curation can be used to fill the gaps and be implemented to facilitate learning on an individual and a whole classroom level. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And excuse me. So we have one more presentation. It is a video recording, so I'll have to make sure I share the sound as well. And by Marie Karen Bravo Moix, who is, well, she was a lecturer here at Texas State in art education, and now she is a lecturer here at Texas State in fashion merchandising. So she's kind of gone back home to her roots there with her areas. Although, of course, we will miss her in art ed, but she's not here today because she is presenting at a conference on Gloria Anzaldúa, and so it just timing just happened. So she was kind enough to record and send me her YouTube video. So let me now share. And so here is Marie.
Hello, my name is Marie Karen Bravo Moix, and I am a fashion merchandising lecturer at Texas State University. My presentation will focus on the Gloria Evangelina Anzaldúa t-shirt archive, her self-curated 38-piece t-shirt collection, and how my research process has evolved into an intersectional feminist research project. Anzaldúa was an artist, activist, philosopher, and author of Chicana cultural, feminist, and queer theory. Anzaldúa had gained some notoriety following the 1987 book Borderlands La Frontera, The New Mestiza. As she continued to publish other books, she also continued teaching and leading workshops for artists. Due to time limitations, I will not explain Anzaldúa's theories, but one of the theories I will be referring to is Nepanlera. It refers to a person who navigates multiple spaces and often feels challenged, someone stuck in between, someone trying to make their own path, even though it is painful and often leads to rejection by others. Anzaldúa's t-shirt collection is housed at the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Library at the University of Texas at Austin. It is important to note that Anzaldúa carefully curated each t-shirt, setting them aside as her t-shirt collection to be archived after her passing. I made an appointment to view the archived materials, took photos with my smartphone camera, and took notes on the provided paper. After I left the archive, I typed my notes into a spreadsheet and filled out an observation checklist for a few t-shirts. I visited the archives on 2 separate occasions to view the whole t-shirt collection, and later I returned for another visit to focus on just a couple t-shirts. Fashion research methodologies prove helpful in collecting and organizing the data. I began with close looking at each t-shirt, visually scanning the t-shirts top to bottom, and writing down every detail that I saw. I then looked again a second time and jotted down any questions or thoughts that came up. By following the suggestions from other fashion scholars, I hope to collect objective, unbiased data, as well as stay focused on my task. Although I found this to be a helpful start, it proved to be too restrictive, leaving out intersectional issues relating to social categories. Latinx fashion texts, which include feminist research methodologies, made it possible to fill in those gaps due to the interdisciplinary nature of this project. Arts-based research practice also proved helpful. And I'm sharing the text here for those of you that are interested in this type of research. Here is one of the t-shirts in the archive. I'd love for you to try close looking on this garment. What do you see? What title would you give this t-shirt? What is your interpretation of this image? I'll give you about half a minute to try the close looking before I reveal the findings. So go ahead and jot down some notes. Okay, let me share what I found during this research. The short-sleeved black t-shirt is missing the garment tags. It appears to have been ripped out as there are still a few white fibers left over from the tag. It is most likely 100% cotton. It has been washed many times as the fabric has pilled, and the black fabric is faded, indicating this was possibly worn many times. The t-shirt is a size large. There is a white pigment screen print graphic on the front of the t-shirt. The rectangle frame features two skeletons. They appear to be supported by a faded ground backed against dots or stars. The skull's eye sockets are looking at each other. A bony hand touches a shoulder, another on the center back, while the other hands are clutching palms. The feet are closely touching at the toes and appear to be engaged in some type of movement. I noticed small handwritten text on the lower right corner of the artwork inscribed with Liliana W., 89. I searched online and found the artist Liliana Wilson, who agreed to an interview. She referred to the image as the dancing skeletons image. The artwork was created using the scratchboard wax technique. The artwork was then taken to a local Austin, Texas small batch printer named Frank Rodriguez to use as a t-shirt design for a fundraising project supporting a struggling local cafe artist community space that was called Las Manitas Cafe in Austin, Texas in 1989. The cafe was owned by Cynthia and Lydia Pérez, who are now owners of La Peña Gallery and Cafe as Las Manitas has closed. The event was held at the downtown music venue Liberty Lunch, and the dancing skeleton t-shirts, which were priced at $10, quickly sold out with proceeds supporting the cafe. A few years later, one of the owners of Las Manitas introduced Anzaldúa to the artist Wilson in 1993. After this meeting, Wilson was then invited by Anzaldúa to attend a Nepantla Artist in Residence program in 1995 at Villas Montalova in Saratoga, California. This was a pivotal meeting for a Chicana artist such as Wilson, according to scholar Norma Cantu, who says, and I quote, Anzaldúa's writing, and indeed her life, significantly changed the landscape of Chicana and Latina writing and art, end quote. Although I had established a timeline that connected how Anzaldúa acquired the t-shirt, I still had no idea why this made it into her t-shirt collection. Here is a photo taken by the artist Wilson, the artist of the t-shirt, of Anzaldúa at the 1995 Nepantleta residency. She is wearing the Dancing Skeletons t-shirt with black leggings, white socks, black Arizona-style Birkenstocks, silver earrings with a short hairstyle. There are a few photos of Anzaldúa wearing this t-shirt in the archives, and during the interviews I learned that this was one of her favorite t-shirts. I had another important conversation with the artist later, who revealed the inspiration for the Dancing Skeletons image. Wilson spoke about the artwork being created following a night of dancing to the song Amor Eterno by Rocia Dorsal. The song is about remembering loved ones who have passed away. Wilson spoke about hearing this song while dancing with a partner during a time when many LGBTQ+ populations in Texas were still villainized by their families and in society. She explained that the image can reflect how love exists beyond limited consensus reality, beyond human markers of socially constructed categories of race, ethnicity, sexuality, and gender. These skeletons can be read as Nepantletas, which touches on the theme of spirituality important to both Wilson and Anzaldúa. I finally understood how this t-shirt related to Anzaldúan theory. There is power in Anzaldúa, a brown Chicana lesbian, wearing the dancing skeleton image during the 1980s and 90s. Wearing this t-shirt is Anzaldúa's politics of fashion. If I hadn't already had the background in Anzaldúan theory, If I had not interviewed the artist, the owner of the venue, and conducted this additional research outside of the fashion studies method, I would not have understood this t-shirt in depth and further marginalized the queer people of color that have already been silenced for so long. Research is iterative, yet in the end I came back to the creator of the archive, Gloria Anzaldúa, and realized that her theories were vital to understanding her collection. Her voice is vital to this research. Isolating each t-shirt separately using a sterile data collection method felt empty because I was missing the context. Fashion scholar Susan Kaiser has pointed out the importance of, and here's a quote from her that I'll read, advocating for a feminist and cultural view of fashion studies, capable of questioning and challenging the oppositional either-or binary, the linear, heterosexual, and essentialist, predetermined thinking of Western colonial thought, is throwing us off from what we can do with fashion studies today. And so relatedly, here I have a quote by Anzaldúa. This is from her Border Art chapter, which states that we can't remove ourselves from the research or the internalized biases from dominant social voices. Breaking free from these restrictions can happen with sharing our stories transparently while conducting this research. Currently, I'm considering how Autohistoria Teoria, a type of personal reflection of one's life stories as theory, could be useful methodology going forward. Thankfully, talking with other scholars about my research, a special thank you to Dr. Adetty Pérez de Miles, and participating in roundtables such as this provides opportunities for me to check my own biases and find new directions that I had not considered. By combining these approaches, I am able to explore how intersectional concepts of clothing can be used as a tool of survival, resistance, decolonization, and more, and how a carefully curated t-shirt collection can be used as a tool for social justice. Thank you so much for letting me share this work with you.
All right. So, of course, with Marie not being here for questions, but if you do have questions for her, maybe put them, in the chat, and I could share those with her later on and have her contact you if you have any questions or comments for her. But for any of our panelists, this is time for our second Q&A.
I have a question for Sara. It's not really a question, but I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on the giving the students the choices to select their own materials. What were some of the biggest surprises, both challenging, but both just that absolutely wowed you based on their selections?
Great question. Yeah, because, I was kind of prompted to think like, well, what would I have chosen if I, had a list? And because of the ways I like to approach my classes, a lot of my ideas would have been like social justice oriented. And so it was exciting for me to see that quite a number of the students were also really interested in social issues, and to then work that into the theme or topic that they chose. I guess maybe some challenges was sometimes the themes were just too broad, and it became very challenging for them when they needed to do the research, find readings to suggest, find artists, that it just was too amorphous. And so some of the work that we did together was to narrow down those ideas, to start to hone in on like what specifically about that broad theme was interesting to them, so that they could then narrow it down, or vice versa. Sometimes it was too narrow and we had to think about, okay, well, maybe how can we connect this back to art history in order to give a greater context to this really interesting like niche of art. So for example, like dark surrealism, they had this idea of these really haunting images, and so we had to kind of backtrack to look, okay, well, what did surrealism set up, and then how is this dark surrealism that you're interested in doing something, maybe like taking surrealism in a different direction. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
No, absolutely. It really does. It becomes really challenging, right? As at the university level, when we have to, often have everything sort of spelled out, right? What we're doing this week, who are the authors that we're reading, and so on. So this opens up some great possibilities, but also some challenges to the structure itself, which is fantastic. But, difficult to navigate as well, but totally worth doing.
Thank you.
I love that too, and I love how that resonates so much with our student population at TWU of them connecting to the material. And I reside in a space that's at tension with that because of preparing my students for the state licensure test, which were written by art educators who don't have that same inclusive worldview. And so there's this hard disconnect between the things that so many of my students want to be studying and memorizing and learning versus the things they need to perform to get that teaching certificate. And so that would be an interesting conversation maybe for us down the road of how can we boot camp and like woodshed what they need to make this test, but then also make sure that we are, protecting space for them to really grow in their understanding of art history too. Because right now I feel like they don't work together.
Well, it makes me wonder with the possibility of, although they say, now that Ed TPA is not going to be, but that since we're going towards a performance-based assessment as opposed to the tests, maybe there is some mixed blessing in there that that opens up that kind of space to where they're not having to memorize just the Western canon. Yeah.
I hope so.
I also think that what Diana proposes is brilliant because it is, using standards like the TEKS in ways that are very open-ended to sort of turn the system on its head and actually be able to do sort of that coalitional work and that deconstructive work using their own sort of standards because they're written in a way that they could be interpreted pretty openly. So I think that, both working within the system, but also working to decolonize the system as well is something pretty significant that I think we're engaged with.
Adetty, I wanted to say something when you mentioned that. First of all, thank you. But like I said, I like that word curate because I feel I've been curating since I was a child. I grew up in San Antonio on the west side, the Barrio. My grandparents were from Mexico and they raised me. And we were poor, but I was always really drawn to art and creativity. And at one point, our refrigerator stopped working, and my grandpa gave me the refrigerator, my abuelito, because he felt I was creative, and so he thought I would do something with the refrigerator. And I used to curate it. I would put all my little gadgets in the empty refrigerator and move it around and just have fun with that. And that's both Bridget and I work with that kind of population, which called at risk. So I was an at-risk child because of a low socioeconomic, but we had rich funds of knowledge. My grandfather was very smart, even though he didn't have a high school education. He saw I was creative, gave me a empty refrigerator to play with, which helped me be a curator at a young age. And he would, every time he found like scraps of metal that he thought were interesting, he's like, do you want them? And I'd be like, yeah, oh, cool. Here's my little robot. So even tapping into that, like not this whole thing of like, oh, pobrecitos, poor kids, they don't have access to stuff. We just have access to different funds of knowledge or different art.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then, to connect it to Gloria Anzaldúa's Autohistoria Teoría, one of the tenets of that particular theory is home knowledge, right? And so that is sort of the home knowledges that we have that are really rich and multivalent, but that sometimes in education they sort of get dismissed, right? And so drawing from those perspectives, from those home knowledges, home languages, and that our students possess to be able to sort of advance and sort of add complexity and nuance to the conversation. So I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
I was thinking a little bit like, I mean, we've talked about this a lot of times, in some of the higher ed circles about, I mean, I love the fact that we do have some K through 12 educators here presenting with us today. I'm so glad that y'all accepted the invitation, because, voices, from the K-12 perspective often gets sort of lost in these sort of sessions. And a lot of times it seems like there's not many K through 12 educators who come out to things like NAEA unless it's very close to where they live. And I know a lot of that has to do with funding or lack thereof. Um, but I wonder if y'all have any thoughts as to maybe other ways of making these sorts of meaningful connections, aside from, the possibility of maybe meeting up at conference. Um, or if
I
anybody,
would say in San Marcos, because that's where we live, we have a Centro Cultural,
Mhm.
which used to be the Mexican school a long time ago, and San Marcos was segregated. Now they have a lot of free art shows. I would say you could connect with their people. They're always open to having people do workshops. You could even have your Texas State students do workshops there, or like have a free workshop for kids or for parents or both, or for teachers. And Calaboose would totally be open to working with Texas State. In fact, Adetty has worked on projects with us at the Calaboose, which we're very grateful for. So looking for those little places, even the San Marcos Public Library is super open to having Saturday workshops for the public, which includes teachers.
And I think that, having access to those local spaces, I think that that's something that maybe Julie could also speak to, because sometimes as, people in higher ed and, scholars and academics, there might not be as many opportunities for us for curation and exhibition. And the way that we connected with Sala Diaz was just very welcoming, and a way to really invite us into the spaces of curation. I don't know, Julie, if you want to expand on that a little bit.
I think I'd like to give all the credit to just what an amazing organization it is, and how, I'm actually continuing to work with them. I'm working to set up an artist residency at my family's property, which is in the Hill Country, and kind of in honor of my grandparents, making a space for artists who work with place and a special focus on women artists, actually. So Sala Diaz is working as the nonprofit entity for grant funding for that, and that was also their sort of interest in working with me, was that we want to make it an opportunity for both women artists or underrepresented artists, and specifically artists who are parents. But I think that they work in this way where they work through networking. And so they told me that one of the ways that they sort of vet artists for their artist residency is through word of mouth and through their network. And so the way that I connected with them was through a mutual friend who had previously been an artist in residence at their casa. It's called Casa Chuck. And I'm so excited to keep working with them because they really are doing, the hard work of nonprofit leadership. So when that residency is live, I will definitely share it because great.
I wanted to respond to Erica Davis. You said exploring feminism. It is linked with teachers creating a classroom that allows exploration and choice. And sadly, San Marcos, it tends to be conservative. And I have tried to share my ideas with teachers who told me, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm not going there. And I'm like, okay. I just network with the teachers that are like, that sounds cool. I want to do that. You're going to find your, birds of a feather flock together. You're going to find your people that are on board, and you're going to find people that maybe are just a little bit too scared to do that. And I did come from Austin, which was way more progressive. We had tons of, we were actually called the Austin Social Justice Teachers Inquiry Group. And we were always creating lessons from a social justice angle. But when I came to San Marcos, a lot of teachers told me, you do you, we do us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's what I was talking about earlier with the pre-service teachers, undergraduate students and I think that's where I start kind of figuring out, without knowing much about them, kind of sort of where they lay on that spectrum as to like, okay, so I think you're coming up from like around Austin, and these over here might be like in New Braunfels or something like this. So yeah.
I think, sorry. I think that, yes, San Marcos tends to run conservatively, but I do think that there is support if the boundaries are pushed. So for instance, outside my classroom, I have the girls and boys bathroom, and I painted rainbows, and I painted he, her, or he, him, they, them in English and in Spanish, she, her, they, them in English and in Spanish. And there were parents that were like, what are we gonna, and the administration was like, because we are an inclusive campus, because we're an inclusive district. So I think like if you push the boundaries and, try be brave, I think that they are willing to support. I just think there's not enough people that are willing to be brave in that aspect. So the more the merrier. Tell them to get jobs in San Marcos and start making change.
I wanted to ask Sue if you could expand, Sue, on your curatorial practices and your present teaching, and potentially in what's happening in your dissertation. If it's not too broad.
Like that's a big question. Like basically two big questions. So I teach, I only teach right now online. I teach online art appreciation. So I do things a little bit differently if I was in person, especially if they were perhaps art education students. So these are non-majors, and I actually do a collections-based assignment in which they have to curate a collection. Some students don't think that they collect things, and I disagree. I think everyone collects something. And so it's just a matter of kind of addressing that. So in terms of curation, with collections, that's the thing that I kind of do with them right now. I had in the past, when I worked with art education students, they put together exhibitions on their own, and so they curate their own kind of lesson plan units, right? But yeah, so my teaching practice, though, I mean, really, if you think about it, everybody's curating something, right? You curate your curriculum. But I don't really address that as creating curriculum. However, maybe I should, right? So that's the teaching part. And then my dissertation. So as some of you know, especially Karen, I've struggled in doing my dissertation for so long, and I finally feel like I figured it out after many years, and I don't want to disclose how many years, but what it's got, my dissertation is following a little bit of an untraditional template. I'm going to be doing more of like a Wunderkammer type of format where I have like 13 different chapters. I'm looking at Aaron Manning's the concept of propositions and using those, and each chapter is addresses a certain proposition. And for example, like one of the chapters is actually on care. It's valuing care. So it's like care of the research materials and care of self. Because I struggled for so long. Actually, one of my chapters is on failure, and it's almost like addressing my failings and addressing it kind of head on. And so the preceding or the following chapter then is on the care. So those things work in conjunction with one another. So the dissertation itself is a curating my curiosities and having the different chapters kind of lay next to each other, right? Or lay us alongside, and then they inform one another. So I'm still trying to work though out. I don't necessarily want each chapter to be like really a full like a nice complete chapter, right? I want them to still have the ability to be charged. If you put two different chapters next to each other, it would be different if you then kind of move that chapter and put it next to another one. Does that make sense? Almost like a Wunderkammer, like my one idea of Wunderkammer, liberating the Wunderkammer. So that's something that I'm still trying to work on. But as it is, I'm very happy with how things are progressing in that way.
No, I love the sort of the description about, not putting these things together because that plays out. That's really very linear, right? And
Right.
the Cabinet of Wonders is all these things that, you might make connections to each other and then there might not be anything, but it really is up to how people sort of go through the material and the layers of knowledge. So I'm really excited to read about the work more in the future. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me. I mean, when I read the call, I'm like, this was made for me. Yeah, I was very excited. I'm very excited to hear how everyone else approached the idea of curation, and so much overlap between everything that we're doing too. It's nice. It was really wonderful to be part of. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we do want. Oh, yes. So Julie just put in here that so you should check out my dissertation and Laura Lee's. Both of them embrace non-traditional formats and nonlinear processes. I will say mine is still. I only have certain areas of it that are publicly available. So, and that's why Adetty would understand kind of what you're getting at there, because she had to deal with my hypertextual website dissertation. And so, yes, very much you could spring from almost any point to any other point within the dissertation. And yes, Laura Lee's as well. I remember seeing that beautiful, beautiful catalog. So yeah. Um, wow. Well, this was great getting to see everybody. It's been like Sarah and I were talking about. I don't think I've seen Sarah since 2016. When I think we're probably both kind of eyeing the idea of not returning from Canada right after somebody's election, and so and wonderful to get to see some new faces that are local to me. I'm in San Marcos as well. So, Adetty, Julie, is there anything you would like to?
Real quick, Kevin.
Oh, sure.
I put it in the chat, but people might not have seen it. We just posted on the CFAE Collaborate and on the emails to the membership the call for nominations for next year's regional artist. As Julie and Kevin and Adetty talked about today how important that is. Next year in the spring, in March 20th through 22nd, we'll be in Louisville, Kentucky. And we are looking for feminist, emerging, or mid-career artists who are interested in arts-based practice, and we're looking for names. So if you know anybody who is out that way, we are accepting nominations until October 1st.
All
So we'd
right.
love
Awesome. Awesome.
Well, I also, echoing Kevin, I want to thank everyone for participating in our 50/50 actions for today. The work is very inspiring, and I hope that we can continue to connect and have conversations formally and informally. So thank you so much. Julie?
Thank you, everyone. I'm so excited about what we came together with today. I think it's been really, really wonderful. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.